He is far too generous. Oh, this is the mic, actually. Okay. Far too generous an introduction, but delighted to be here. I want to talk to you about the algorithm. Now, the algorithm ranges from toy. You know that 5-year-olds can construct algorithms because it can be very simple, to deadly actors. The algorithm is very interesting. It's open. It goes from very simple to very complex. The algorithm that I have been tracking is, it's about reconstituting materialities, buildings, big things, into something that is rendered invisible to the eye, so that the actual operational element is in this invisible zone, though the object that feeds that algorithm can be a huge building, a huge ship, a city. Now, most of the algorithms that I've been working on this kind of stuff, entail buildings. So one way of thinking about it, that's the way I think about it myself, is that I'm a tracker, tracking. So I want to see how come that this building winds up in a completely different zone, producing values that are extraordinary. So here is the beginning of this story. Look at this. Ah, there it is. I was looking for it here. So look at this curve of growth in 2001, from less than $1 trillion to 62 trillion just 6 years later. Think of anything that can have that growth curve. I tried. Doesn't exist. That is an extra, you understand the escalation from 1 trillion to 62 trillion. Now, just in between, the global GDP of all countries in the world is about that, more or less 62 trillion. So this is an instrument that is, you have to figure out what happened here. How is this possible? And the other feature is that those 62 trillion, as I already signaled, were at that point in time, this is right before the big crisis of 2008, that was bigger, I repeat, than the global GDP of all the countries in the world. But those 62 trillion were only 10% of the value of, sort of a whole bunch of financial instruments that really mark a whole new period, where algorithmic mathematics becomes a critical tool that you can achieve that, which was over 600 trillion. So I got very interested in understanding what lies behind that, and I started with a very simple object. Why is this not moving? There we go. So here is the background. That led me to the tracking. There are two moments that I want to describe. One is this: modest little houses for fairly low-income people. But people who, this is the United States, it's also now, by the way, footnote, entered the UK, very active here, and the continent, Germany, etc. So this is like an almost invisible history in the making that has very serious consequences, but the consequences are not understood in terms of that invisible, powerful actor that is the algorithm. And I repeat, most algorithms are used for very good things, including little kiddies, as I said. So I'm not against the algorithm. This is just a way I think of myself, as I said, as a kind of tracker. What is the capability that the algorithm represents? Since it is open, since we can build it, we can build little ones, easy ones, any one of us can do it. But then it can also be micidiale. I love that Italian term. I hope that helped. Now, I want you to look at this. These were all modest households. This is a project that lasted for the financial system for about 7 years. They produced 16 million contracts from low-income households who didn't own a home. So an extraordinary project, an extraordinary deployment of people to generate over 16 million contracts, which means sign. You don't have to pay anything, sign. It still meant that a person had to go to modest little whatever neighborhoods and do that. So it was thousands of people, an army deployed to reach 16 million contracts. Now, the result was an extraordinary set of foreclosures. They all lost, most of them. 14.5 million, kaput, finished. But the financial system, those who played it smart, made a lot of money. But they also produced the crises. They overdid it. But it worked. This was a test. Can we actually use algorithmic mathematics, and I'll tell you what lies behind that, to generate this kind of money, even though it eventually ends in a disaster? Here's another mutation of urban land, and this involves not modest little houses, but big buildings. Now, I want you... So, this is just 1 year. This is a very important year, but still 1 year. It's an emergent history. It goes on. This is buying existing property, where New York and London are the queens of the domain. This is the data when New York and London are already on the way down. So look at that column there. I hope everybody can see it, right? So the growth is at 10%. And then you look, oops, can you see this? Other less significant, less powerful, whatever, maybe at a lower rate. But the process is in place. And this is, those 55 billion is just 1 year, just buying property. And we don't even know exactly who bought it. So 55 that 1 year, 55 billion in New York, 47 billion in London, and then it goes on. I'm looking at 100 cities. Clearly, there is no room for all of them. So, and if you just take foreign investment, and in that particular year, which is a marking year, because then London and New York cease being the queens of the domain, they have less growth, so the money is still coming in, and other cities become more important. So what lies behind this is that it's only a few buildings that can play this role. And I'll tell you a bit later what the role is. Now, then you look, New York, Paris, etc., you can see Amsterdam, for instance, is later than New York, so its growth is 248%. Even the negatives don't necessarily mean a negative. Now, in London, just to make it very, very concrete, since we are in London, the Qatari royals, I have nothing against them, huh? They own more of central London than the Queen of England. I actually find that rather adorable as a concept. It's invisible. We see the palace, the habitat of the Queen is a visual event. We can see it. But the Qataris have bought? We don't know. So here are I just want to focus on Germany just for a bit, because this is sort of interesting data. This signals the rolling quality of all of this. So Berlin, that's just 1 year, huh? 11 billion, but minus means that less than the year before. So the newcomer to the new queen, after they did Frankfurt, München, is now Hamburg. So it's this roving capability. And you, oopsie, there you go. So you can sort of see it sort of grow and enter other domains. Nanjing, I just mentioned Nanjing there because Nanjing is the latest darling with Shenzhen. They have already done Shanghai, they have done Hong Kong, they have done Beijing. Now, one question, back to the materiality. What does all of this look like? So there I was walking with a journalist who wanted me to talk about all these buildings and these are all old, nice, beautiful buildings in central London. You can see that. I never go there, by the way. I just get the data. That I don't think is so pretty, but basically very nice, pretty buildings. And so I'm there with the journalists, hearing the tourists talk, and they say, look at all these adorable British buildings. they're all owned by one Chinese company. Now, nothing wrong with that in principle. What I really want to get at is the invisibility of it. A whole process has taken place, and the invisibility is that we can't tell. So the algorithm has transformed material conditions, huge, visible, enormous buildings, into something that has produced an extraordinary amount of value. So here is, according to Seville's, the value that is far more than global GDP of all the countries in the world, $217 trillion, is the value right now of these buildings. This is just a limited number of buildings, but this is around the whole world, that have been transformed into a kind of value that is invisible to the eye, and invisible to my eye, by the way, also is a clock. Where is the clock? And so how much more time do I have? Because I realized that I was not prepared for this. So somebody knows how much time, because I can go on talking, and that's a threat. You should consider this a threat. But so somebody will tell me, right, when I shut up? Okay. Other instantiation, 65,000 buildings in the greater area of London, all owned by entities that are outside. None of them is British, or is operating in England, in the UK. No names of people. This is a lot. Many of these underused. Why? Because they're also function in that algorithmic way, where they are assets. And here I come to the sort of core thing, and that is that these buildings are functioning, including the little houses that were transformed. They cease being little houses. They're just materialities. They're assets. And that is what the high investment sector wants. They want asset-backed securities. You and me are told that we should want derivatives. Stay away from the derivative. The derivative derives its value from a very long chain of instances. What happens with a derivative right now, it's the cheap instrument. It didn't start that way, but it is that now. For us, the people, for municipal governments. Not too long ago, 14 municipal governments in Italy at the same time, the same hour, the same minute, all went broke. Why? They thought they had bought a loan. Nope, they had been sold a derivative. And that derivative broke. They all went broke. And these are stories that repeat themselves. So this is final example. Big towers, this is new construction. They're empty. We think, this is Manhattan, it's happening in London too, it's happening in Paris. We think, oh, poor owners. That empty building works as a materiality. That empty building makes more money than an occupied building. These happen to be for residential use. The fact that they're empty produces more profit for the owners than if they were full. And here are quite a few of these. So I leave you with an image. The city is an interesting space. It's a complex but incomplete space. It's a space where those without power get to make a history, get to make a little economy, get to, make up politics, culture, etc. When the city, I apologize, when the city begins to be used, I mean, it's very partial what I described clearly, right? Just a few huge buildings. But when that materiality can be transformed, we just see the materiality into something that is an extraordinarily powerful and mobile instrument, I would say we, the people, are losing. And I emphasize the city is a place where historically those without power have gotten to make a history. Thank you very much.